Here we are. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to this live broadcast here on LinkedIn. As people join, if you could just put a comment in about where you are geographically and maybe what you sell as a way of getting the conversation going. Let me just validate that we're live. Yep, we are. Excellent. Okay, well, why don't I let everybody introduce themselves? I'll start with Jamie. Why don't you just give us a little background on yourself, what you do?
So my name's Jamie Edwards. Thank you for having me on, first of all. And I work for a company called Spot On, and we're a hospitality tech space. And, I've been doing hospitality sales for, I think this is my 10th year now. Started out with Micros before Oracle bought it, but that's kind of how my background. I've always been in, food and beverage technology.
Cool. How about you, Jessica? You got an interesting occupation.
Yes. So my name's Jessica Slaughter. I am lead sales executive at Fly Guys Drone Services. We are a nationwide drone service provider. So we collect drone data or aerial data all across the United States, particularly for companies with distributed assets. So my background came from hospitality management. I've been with Fly Guys for 3.5 years now. Started off in operations, worked my way up, and have been doing sales for the past 2.5.
Great. Okay. Well, why don't we start with the first question, Bree?
Yeah. What is the money ball of sales?
From my perspective, the money ball of sales is figuring out how the whole game of what you sell works. I think a lot of us, we get taught it's prospect, discovery, presentation, demo, negotiate, and close. But that doesn't work very well, does it? That kind of, that works good when it's inbound and they're interested and they want to buy it, but that's very rare. That's kind of like the best of the best deals. I view it as more like reverse engineering those marginal deals, the ones that can and could close, but typically get stalled. Does anybody else have a strong view on that, or?
Yeah, I definitely do, Brian. From my perspective, it's relationship building.
Yeah.
These relationships are really what I guess more or less trying to create rather than sell. With being in the drone industry, it's so new that a lot of problems haven't necessarily been identified. So identifying the problem and creating a solution for my clients is really what I think is the strong suit.
Cool. And how do you do that?
It's just a really case by case basis. Like lots of puzzle. It's a puzzle, because I've been in this industry for the past 4 years. I've seen a lot. A lot of it's experimentation. There's not necessarily something just straight out the box. So coming up with something custom is what we've been really good at.
Cool. How about you, Jamie? Any views on that, or?
Yeah, I agree with the relationship building. Most of my business, probably about 75 to 80%, is referral business from clients that I've worked with or that the company's worked with. So I definitely agree on that aspect. But, each business is so different. Like even talking to two restaurant owners, right? The way they view their business and what's important to them is totally different. So each situation is it is custom. It's finding out what is their vision and what do they want to do, and then how can we tailor our software to work to make that happen.
Yeah. And what do you think reps get wrong about relationship building? Because a lot of people call it like being friends and buddies as opposed to it being part of a sales process.
I think a lot of reps get the fact that it's not a quick process. These things take time. It's not something that happens overnight. Like I said, I think sales to me is more than just selling a solution. It's finding a solution to a problem rather than necessarily like selling a product.
Right.
Being in my industry, at least for me, I wouldn't be comfortable pushing something that I know my client doesn't need. I think karma plays a big part in sales. And so if I can find a solution, whether it's myself or something that I know will work for the client that might not be with my company, creating those relationships and being able to figure it out on that aspect, I think people get wrong.
Yeah, I got to imagine selling your service that you're looking for that match between what the client needs and what you can do. And they're not going to see that.
That's correct.
Yeah. So you
I
have to
think
build up
sometimes,
that rapport. Go ahead, Jamie.
yes, I would say I think sometimes it's dangerous when you have that relationship. Is sometimes you can still take it for granted, so you don't think you have to work as hard. But sometimes, from my perspective, you work even harder on some of those deals because you want to maintain that relationship. Right now, you're invested as much as they're invested. Right, so we all have our favorite customers that we have, or larger clients than some of the other clients we have that take up more of your time. And that's how you're invested in their business. That's one of our slogans is your business is our business, because we try to make it personal, and you can't ever take that for granted. So I think that's one of the biggest traps you can fall into is when you have a good relationship with a customer and they're referring you business, is not taking care of them the way you started out, because that's why they like you, because you're there when they call, you help them with service issues. You answer the questions they have when new things come up in their business. You try to find new solutions to help them. And so that's why that relationship is good. So you can never take that for granted. You always have to keep doing those things. So I
Yeah,
think that's a trap.
it's
Some
something
that you fall into.
you earn every day. And I think it's so important because if you don't have the relationship, you're being viewed as a commodity, a thing.
Mhm.
And you really don't buy things. You just go on Amazon and buy a thing. To solve a problem, you need that relationship. You need to dig into the problem that they may not even know they have.
That's
And I
exactly
think,
right. That's exactly in my industry. A lot of it's been education. So showing them solutions that they're unaware of exist.
Yeah. And how do you get them to that? Do you have particular questions, Jessica, that you use that can kind of get them? Do you show examples?
Yes. So I do a lot of online demos. We also do a lot of trade shows. Sometimes at different trade shows, clients are unaware that drones could even be used in their industry, or they're intrigued because they're cool or new. And what we're using them for is interesting to them in their industry.
Yeah. And does it take a while for them to connect with that? Or is it kind of like a Rorschach where you show it to them, you ask them what they see?
Yes. So one particular really good example is, so we do a lot of work in engineering. The data that we provide is very, very large. So civil engineers get a hold of this data, and it's much more data than they're used to working with. Showing them what they're able to do with the data sets and how they are able to incorporate them in their workflow and make their workflow a lot more simpler is something that we do pretty regularly.
Yeah. Cool. And how do you sustain that relationship through the sale? Because it goes through ebbs and flows. High interest probably at the beginning, and then it kind of slips away probably right after you give them a proposal. Am I guessing right?
Yes. So a lot of times our clients, we won't obtain them unless they win their job. So they're
Okay.
using our product as part of a portion for their proposal. So just keeping in contact with them, kind of sharing relevant examples with them regularly is how we maintain that client relationship.
Well, that's kind of what I mean by that whole game, because, anyone can kind of take an order. Somebody calls up, they've got the problem that you solve, they want your product, get me a quote. We can all do that. But
Mm-hmm.
what's hard is trying to find somebody who has the problem that we solve, doesn't really care about it yet, but we get them to care about it and kind of build up that value pile enough that they will buy.
Right.
Yeah.
well, I think
What's the
it's
next
interesting.
question, Bree?
Oh, I think Jamie has something to add.
Oh, did I?
Well, I was going to say sometimes, and maybe Jessica will agree with me, is sometimes once you get the agreement, hey, we want to move forward with you, that's when sometimes the real work begins, right? Because then it depends on the scope of the project you're working on. There's so many resources you have to bring in, partners, things like, like take a stadium, for example, you got the ticketing aspect, you got the food and beverage aspect, how does it look from a customer view, right? When we get to a ball game, what's our experience like? But then those vendors that are in the stadium, what's their experience going to be like when they're trying to take care of customers, sell product, whether it's, hats and jerseys, or if they're selling the food, and so it's just that whole experience. That's kind of, you have to talk about that story. Tell me your vision, and let's figure out how to make that vision come true. And then, did you even think about this aspect? You want to do this, but this is going to create, there's 3 other things that you're going to have to, resolve to do what you want to do. So that sometimes that's when the real work starts, is once the agreement's made, and then you got to figure out how to bring it all together and make it work.
Yeah, because they become your best salespeople eventually, right? Because if it's a referral business, they talk to each other.
Well, it's like you said, is like when everybody's excited when the paperwork's signed, right? But some of these projects take 6 to 8 months. So, there's that same enthusiasm is not always there in month 4, but you're still trying to get everything together to make it come true, because you have a deadline you have to get it done by. So that's how you keep that relationship, and the excitement is, like Jessica said, you got to stay in. When you're not a product, but you're a solution, that's when you don't become a commodity. And that's what you got to just keep building that relationship around.
And does the relationship change through the sales process? Have you noticed that it's kind of fun at the beginning, but near the end, there tends to be this adversarial almost, with pricing, terms and conditions, references, prioritization, timing, start to surface the real change that goes on within their business when they buy your product?
Jessica, you want to go first?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I've been going first, so I didn't want to keep hogging the screen.
Keep the order.
I think that the way that I maintain the relationships with my customers, because I deal with a lot of really large consumers, that the face-to-face person that I'm dealing with doesn't necessarily handle all of the end portion of the sales cycle. So I don't think my relationship with them necessarily changes on that aspect. It pretty much stays the same, if not continues to grow.
Yep. And does it ever stall or die?
Oh, yes. And, reviving those relationships is a lot of times a lot more challenging than creating them.
It sure is. Yeah, if it's kind of the mental decision's been made in their mind, and they may not have even told you, or it may not have been their decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it happens too, because we're almost like, they have a checklist. So like we almost go from sales to like project manager. Yeah. Because in our instance, a lot of times there's a deadline, right? Hey, season starts on this day, or my restaurant opens on this day. So everything has to be done. People have to be trained, right? So the closer you start getting to that deadline, like you're saying, Brian, the relationship does change, because they want to make sure that everything's going to be ready to go when they're ready to go. So it does change a little bit there. But, again, I think that's what makes us more of a solution sometimes, because that's where you have to bring in the resources to help you make sure you get things done and on time, whether it's the people that are running the cables and the Ethernet lines, so that everything can communicate, to the hardware people that are coming and installing 300 terminals in a stadium with self-service kiosk, and everything has to talk to each other. And then once that card goes through, it has to go to the right bank. Like, there's so many things that I's you have to dot and T's you have to cross. It's a major project. But
and I think project manager, I've heard that when I interview great salespeople, because a lot of it is like that. Because after the initial meeting, when it's a fit, there's a need, but is the need a top priority, or a nice to have, or a curiosity? And then how do you get it done administratively, financially, and politically within the customer base?
I have to say, I came from a project management background
You did?
through my company. And so having that background and understanding and knowing how it works, not only on the front end to serve the customer, but also what the back end of my team is capable of, I think is a really, really effective way of being able to relay to the customer their expectations and how the process is going to occur.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, is setting the right expectations. You know, we need certain things from you, just like you're going to need us to get certain things done, but we have to have their input. That's where that partnership is, right? You're going to help us make this a reality. But yeah, it's kind of scary because sometimes it's like they checked us off, right? Hey, what do we need to make this happen? And they check us off in the box, and they always forget about they're still dealing with us because they have 9 million other things going on. But it's like we still got to get information from you and input and things like that. So you have to keep that communication open and manage that every step of the way.
Well, that's it, because there's a lot to get done in the complex sale. And, the demo and the proposal and the negotiation, but that's really when it starts, because then you start dealing with the economic people, the purchasing people, the implementation people, legal, security. And all those people are kind of there to shoot it down or to show why it's not a great idea, or the risk associated with it and the implications of that risk, and all these red herrings, and your competition calls in and say, no, don't go with them, go with us because of this, this, and this.
And for me, most of my customers are reoccurring clients, or we hope that they're a reoccurring client. So the largest challenge is they've bought in, it's been sold. We've got to make sure that we execute that first time, because
Yes.
if not, it's a big challenge to try and win that back.
And that becomes a sale because people think, well, I bought it. Where is it? It's not working, right? They think the minute they give you the order, the next day, everything's up and working. And there's implementation, there's training, there's integration, there's all these other things that we don't have control over that we need their engagement in. And that's where the project management capabilities and thought process can help you kind of map that out and get them bought into it.
I did have a question I wanted to bring up too, because I think, you talk about sales and how's the process changed, how's the dynamic changed of how we're interacting with customers, how do we find customers. But I think the more we talk to some people, maybe Jessica and others can share some light on this, is the customer is looking nowadays, the customer information is the ROI. Like that's the goal for most businesses now. How many times does that customer come to my establishment? What do they normally order? How much do they spend? All of that stuff is the goal, because they're paying someone to market to those customers, right? How can I get those customers back in to spend more money? Because it costs more to go out and get a new customer than retain the ones you have, those kind of things. So I think as we talk to more and more restaurants or, business owners, as we're getting into retail, the software system itself is not so much the important thing to them anymore. It's what kind of information am I getting from your solution that I can use to grow my revenue, cut my cost, help with labor shortages, all of those things. And that's where the real goal is that I think most companies are looking for nowadays.
But does the person who has the problem that you solve know that at the beginning, or is that person the entry point, or is that the person that sounds more like one of the end points of the person? Meaning that I get a lot of students that you really have to think through who on a cold outbound cares about this.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I think that kind of goes back to the relationship aspect too, because a lot of times starting with the smaller fish and getting them to buy in and working your way up to that higher level C-level employee is really where you maintain that strong relationship. And so once they see they bought in, now the C-level person is the one who cares about the ROI versus the lower level employee who bought into it, they believe in it, they love the product, but the higher level is going to be the one, well, what do I actually get out of this?
It's a great
Right.
point, because you bring up the wrong topic to the right person can be very, because you probably on your sale, it's the wow factor of what you can do today with drones
Right.
that you
Yeah,
couldn't
drones are
do.
cool. They're new.
Cool.
They're
What's cooler than a drone, right?
right.
Right.
It's a showstopper, right? I'm at a trade show right now where I've got a booth and I've got a massive drone. Everybody wants to see it, but
That
what
doesn't
are
mean
you,
they're gonna buy
what
it.
actual insight can I get from this that is useful?
Yes. Right.
Well, I think it's
And-
interesting because sometimes, like you're saying, Brian, when you're talking, or Jessica, when you're talking to that initial person, they may be trying to solve a small problem to them, right? We need a new reservation platform for our restaurants, right? Because the one we use now charges, monthly by the head. There's so many, we don't own the data or whatever it is, right? So you're just trying to solve that one small problem. But by doing that, you're able to convey that, hey, by the way, we can solve this problem, but do you know you own the data, not someone else? And that, we don't charge you, these fees that they're charging you. So it opens the door to have conversations to other solutions, other problems we can solve, not just this one simple one that you called me for. And I think Jessica said that way back in the beginning is when you're talking to that person and they're wanting to solve this issue, and then you show them all the other things that you can do that they didn't realize was a possibility, you're almost cementing that relationship to the fact that, wow, you're here to help my business, not just in a way I thought you could help me, but you're going to help me in other ways that I didn't even think about, right?
And I got to believe in your sale, you're selling change at the beginning. Because when you switch something that's so core to their business, where all that data is in there, that's a big change.
Yes. One of the
How do you get
most
over
asked
that?
questions. Well, I was going to say, one of the most asked questions is, in customer expectations in their mind, one of the most asked questions, if they're thinking about switching, is, what is that transition going to look like?
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things you have to set that expectation, and just kind of walk them through how this is going to take place, because that, and like you hit it right on the head. That's their biggest fear is, even if I agree this is the right move for us, that whole transition period is going to be a nightmare, because you're changing, right? You're changing from one product to another product. It's a learning curve. It's like going from an Android phone to an Apple phone. Even though you might perceive the Apple phone to be better, you still got that learning curve you have to go through. So that is probably the number one question we get after the sale is, what's the transition going to look like?
Because the people who either use it or you might initially get traction with may not be the ones that have to face that change. Other people, because the people that at the registers are like, I don't want to have to learn something new.
Exactly.
There's nothing in it for them, right?
You hit the nail right on the head. The people who are going to, on that scope.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was going to say the people on the scope the people who are making that decision are in another state or another office somewhere. And it's not the person who's going to be standing in front of that customer trying to have that interaction and take that transaction. And so, yes, they're usually the last to know that you're about to have to learn a new software system.
Yeah.
Sorry.
A little bit of pushback on that. Yeah. Do you face that type of change thing that you have to manage in your sales process, Jessica?
What I was going to say is a lot of times I'm dealing with industries like utilities or telecommunications, and I have a disruptive technology. It's disruptive to their workflow. It's new, it's innovative. And these are industries that have been slow to change. So a lot of times it goes back to the relationships. Building these relationships and earning that rapport and that trust it's critical to be able to show what these technologies are able to do and why innovating is so important.
But when they face it from other people internally, is that where deals stall for you, or is it?
Yeah, I would say so. Definitely. You have someone that might bite in and the other person's pushing back.
Yeah. And how do you prevent? Have you found a magic way of preventing that? Because
I wish, like I said, with this being a relatively new industry, there's no magic button. It's just repetitively showing examples that are relevant to my client, to show them the technology and how it is able to assist them in what their endeavors are.
Yeah. And where do your deals stall, Jamie?
It's kind of so our deals sometimes stall with the people who use the product every day are the ones that want the change, and the people who have to make the decision, they don't deal with it day to day. They don't see the need. So sometimes that's where it stalls, and you have to it's a different sale, right? What you're selling to those people is a different solution than what the initial people that are using it day to day want. So you have to, switch your mindset, and it's like, okay, what's going to make them see the value in making this switch? Because they're going to get A, B, and C that really is different than what the front of the house users are going to see when they make a switch. So that's kind of where our stalls is who's using it versus who's got to get the okay. That's where we have a lot of disconnect.
And they push back on the okay for economic reasons or change reasons or any reason?
A lot of both. So you can imagine, some of our customers may have 500 locations, right? So now you're looking at, that's just a big project, right? You may not do all 500 at once, but it's still a big project. But a lot of times it's economic reasons, especially with things going on in food and beverage today. And some of it is the transitional part of it, right? Maybe in the back of their mind, they may be wanting to change the way they do business and head in a total different direction than they're doing today. So maybe our solution might work today, but it might not be the right one a year from now, because they may want to go strictly to like a ghost kitchen, so to speak. We're not going to have physical locations. Everything's going to be online takeout. So, how we use the software is going to be totally different than the way we use it today. So there's a lot to consider there.
Cool. Oh, is there another question, Bree?
Yeah, what is the whole game of sales?
Yeah, I mean, the whole game is considering all of these things. I think a lot of reps get real comfortable with that beginning part, talking about the product, demoing the product with somebody who uses it, gets excited, send me a proposal, and then it stalls. The whole game is all the way to the order, the implementation, and then the referral that they can bring to you. I think too many people, and because I get messages from reps all the time, says, "Oh, I gave a perfect presentation, a perfect proposal." And it's like, okay, that's nice. That's a good start. But did you get a perfect deal? Right? You didn't get, realize the deal. Because we have to get the deal. That's the objective of it. Until you do, it's kind of just academic. It's practice. It's playing business instead of doing business. And in the complex sale, a lot of us, we don't really know how to do that, how to keep it going.
Well, I was going to ask Jessica too, and maybe she can shed some light on this. But like some of the complex sales, sometimes it's who all's involved in this decision, right? Because you may be talking to 90% of the people and they're all on board, but you've got that there's one or two people that are in a different location, maybe halfway around the world. You never know. And they're the ones that can actually make or break your deal, right? And you don't find that out sometimes if you don't ask the right questions. But maybe you don't ask those questions and you find out, hey, it got all the way to accounting and they said no, right? Because it doesn't gel with our accounting system, or it's too much work to make that integration. So it's like, everybody else that you've talked to in the organization is like, yes, let's do it. But then the people who control the flow of the money are like, no, this can't happen. So
I think that those are important. You always want to find out who the ultimate decision maker is going to be, whether it be from the accounting side or if it's a C-level executive. If there's a way to adapt your product or your service to be able to mold and fit what their needs or expectations are, finding that out ahead of time is crucial to making the deal happen.
And I got to imagine if you're selling to laggards, utilities, big companies don't like to change. They focus on risk versus reward. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Versus like a an early adopter where it's a young company. There's not a lot of lawyers involved. They've never been sued before. There's not a lot of process to it. That's a little bit easier.
Sure. And you're looking at sales cycles that might be a month, 3 months, maybe 6 to sales cycles that are multi-year sales cycles.
Right.
Those are fun, boy, I tell you. But it's amazing how.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's so funny, and like you can go in and talk to some people, Brian, and they may be spending $100,000, right? They'll make that decision in a week. And you have some smaller customers that only maybe have 1 or 2 locations, and you're talking about 10 to 15 to 20,000, and it's all perspective on their end that takes 6 months to a year, like Jessica's saying, to make a decision, to make a switch. And it's just, you go in thinking this is going to be a long process because of how big the project is, but sometimes those decisions get made rather quickly. And then the ones you think may be simple sales, which that's a misnomer today's, there's hardly any more simple sales. Those sometimes take longer.
Yeah. And have you developed a sense of judging that when you first talk to them?
For me, I have no expectation because everyone it's an unknown factor, kind of like what Jamie said. It could be a small client that takes a really long time or a large client that closes really quickly. So I try not to go in with any expectation of timeline. Now, of course, I have my own KPIs I have to meet. Absolutely.
Right.
But going in with a non-pressuring point of view or non-pressuring sales tactic, at the end of the day, you're going to seek more. It's going to give you more reward.
Well, you get more information, more real information.
Right.
Because that's another thing that we see as salespeople. The people that we're talking to typically are more optimistic than the people that they're talking to internally.
Sure.
And we're not getting the real information. We're getting their filtered information. And how have you found your customers as far as them understanding how to get it done internally? Do they know how?
To get the sale closed internally?
Get the administrative, get the paperwork done, get any legal thing done, get the transaction done.
So for me, I deal with a lot of different industries. We've dealt in 36 different. So it's been very different all across the board. Some of them, we really have to pry, that information from them because it's a really slow process. So they're unaware of like all the T's that need to be crossed and I's dotted. And some of them, it's really rapid. And there's all these boxes that are check, right across the board. So just asking the right questions and kind of probing them of what the process is from the very beginning is an effective way to make that happen.
And do they know it or do they sound like they know it?
50-50.
Yeah, because I've always found that they don't really, you don't find out that until near the end of the quarter.
Right.
Because when the pressure comes, that's what surfaces the real issues. People are finding out, you didn't do this. You didn't test it. You didn't validate it. You didn't do a reference call. You didn't do this.
And you know what, Brian? Those are some of the things that are most important because when you get to purchasing, there's a make or break. If you don't have the right information for the PO, your client may not come back to you.
Because purchasing doesn't care. They're there to fill out and document a legitimate purchase and have it prepared for the auditors. They don't care what the product does for the company. They care about it being purchased properly.
Right.
Which is a very different agenda.
That influence is strong because they can tell you, don't deal with this vendor anymore. They can't get the POs right.
Right. Yeah. Or this has to go back for review. I need another this thing or that form filled out. Did you get this done? And they're not on the approved vendor list. Whatever it is, they come up with reasons not to issue it because there's no reward in purchasing.
Right.
Everyone thinks they get paid based off of their discount. No, they get paid off of producing purchase orders that can be audited. And that's what their fear is. That's their downside.
I have another question.
Yeah,
How
go.
does the whole game differ from a sales process?
Well, because if you read books on sales, they don't cover the whole game. Everyone thinks that it's that conversation. That's what sales is, talking.
Mhm.
But in the complex sale, it's everything from prospecting all the way to referral. That's our job. And a lot of reps don't see it that way. They see it as, well, I came, I gave a great presentation, fantastic demo, prettiest proposal in town. Where's my order?
Mhm.
And if you read the books, it's all about, oh, say these, get them this type of question. What's the subject line? They don't consider what happens after that sales call. That's where the real work takes place. And unless you've sold to the same company before, those people don't understand the internal things that have to get done. The most common response I always got, well, I forward it to my manager. I'm sure it's in procurement. No, it's in your manager's inbox. He hasn't opened it, and he doesn't know where procurement is. Because a lot of reps don't even know what a purchase request is. And you're like, this is your whole job. And no one teaches it either, right? The book, it's not in the books. Managers don't, because managers are lucky enough to only work on the best of the best deals. And the best of the best deals are the ones most likely to close.
So how do you
So they,
know if you're playing the whole game? So how do you know if you're playing the whole game? Yeah.
Well, I'll say I had a client this week, and I can appreciate. So, like, they basically, there's someone I've been following up with, right? They're a seasonal client, but they basically told me, listen, we are discontinuing our relationship with 2 vendors that we currently use. But we know this for us. We know for us, this is a 6 to 8 month process. So let's start having these conversations now, because the person that I'm talking to knows all the stuff that has to happen in their organization to make it happen. Even if they say yes, there's just a lot of stuff that has to go on. So they know and for them, they know it's a 6 to 8 month process. So that's where, listen, this is turning into a project manager now, like Jessica said, because there's going to be so many things and so many people involved. This is not, hey, I did a presentation, I need a check for a deposit or whatever. It's a simple sale. When they're telling you their process is 6 to 8 months, that's when you know you're in a complex sale, like Ryan is saying, and you're going to be project managing this thing from A to Z, and you got to make sure you're getting all the relevant info you need from all the relevant decision makers that you have to talk to.
yeah. And I think that mindset of a project manager is very helpful, because who would somebody rather talk to? A project manager who's helping them, or a sales rep who just wants the order?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because unfortunately, I think majority of sales reps it's kind of a bad reputation, right? Like
Well, right, because if
like
you
I want something from you. That's what a lot of customers think. Like, you're trying to get something from me. Project managers, like you said, Brian, they're helping in the process. So looking at from that point of view, as I'm more than just a sales rep, I am a project manager as well. And or at least I understand the project management process, and I understand also your industry and what you're trying to accomplish. Having that level of the relationship with the client is super valuable.
well, that's it. Because why do we use realtors? Okay, we use
Because for the
well,
legal prospect of it.
right, because we can find the home on our own. We go onto Zillow. We can look at them all. We can drive by them. We can use Google Earth and all this stuff. We need somebody who knows how to buy a house, right? What,
Right.
you just don't show up with a suitcase of cash or write a check? Here you go. Where do I sign?
Yeah. If when you sit down at a closing table, that's when you realize this is why I hired a realtor right here. Right.
Well, right. And you want to kind of get a sense of, are there issues with the neighborhood, the schools, the neighbors? Why has it been on the market so long?
Negotiating on your behalf.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think
And
Jessica made a great point earlier. So, like, let's say I'm dealing with a client and they're like, listen, this is what we're looking to do. And you know that you've dealt with customers are going to have the kind of the same, if it's a baseball park, right, or a theme park. So you kind of know these are some of the things we have to think about that you may not have thought about. So you're bringing that to the table and to light. So that just, it kind of you're from consultant, like Jessica, you're not just a salesperson who's like, hey, I need to sell because I got to hit my KPIs, right? Now you're consulting them on, I understand this is what you want to do, but in our experience, when you do this, you have to be able to take care of A, B, and C. Oh, we didn't think about that. But yeah, this is how other people have handled it, right? So now you're consulting them, you're helping them make decisions on how they're going to run their organization. I mean, I had a meeting last week with a minor league hockey team, and they're literally wanting us to sit down with the architects to figure out where are we going to put the concession stand, right? Where are we putting the fan store, right? Where is our equipment going to go to utilize the best flow, right? So it's all about, that's more than just a simple sale, but that's where those relationships get built right there. So.
And that's it, because they think it's a lot easier than it is too, because it's easy until you try. Just go down to your procurement people and say, I want to buy some stuff.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, good. Thanks for coming by.
Right.
Go talk to your manager, right? Well, because I always sold to like engineers, and they always thought, oh, just send us a quote. We'll get the order next week, and it never happened. I never get them a quote because they're going to block me now because they think it's easy and it's not going to go anywhere, and they're not going to know why. And then you got to assume that they're going to ghost you, right? Because everybody thinks that's just rude, but it's because you haven't built up any reason for them to want to talk with you. They either have to talk with you, you catch them by chance and they pick up the phone, or they want something, or they want to talk with you. And if you can bring ideas, project planning, the implementation of the drone or the concession software, and the issues that are associated with it and how other people do it and the traps not to fall into, that's why they'll talk to you. If you're just calling up, where's the order? That's not a very engaging conversation.
Right.
Anybody who's listening got questions, put them in the comments. That'd be helpful.
Brian, just to touch on that, I think a way to look at it as well as before your return on investment, what is the offering that you can bring for the investment? Yeah.
Well, that's it, because people want to reduce risk. And if you look at the trajectory of the deal, it's really high. You get the proposal, and then there's this gap of time where the internal gauntlet has to be run. And people are naturally going to come up with alternatives. Do nothing. Let's wait. Let's do as little as possible. Can't we do it with something we already have? If you haven't helped.
Go ahead.
If you haven't helped arm your champion or the people who get the big win out of this, they're going to kind of fall down because they're not salespeople. They're thinking logically. This makes sense for the company. It's cheaper, it's easier, it's more fun, it's more information, whatever it is. And they get frustrated because someone else isn't seeing that.
How do you learn to play the whole game?
I think you have to look at those marginal deals, not the easy ones. The ones where you had a huge champion who was high up, could get it done. Go talk to your other reps and look at the deals that you think couldn't close. That shouldn't have closed. They said it wasn't that important, or they said there was an easier way, or it's too early, we're not early adopters, but that rep closed it. And try and study that and reverse engineer that. We're on LinkedIn all day trying to find out the next subject line or the breakup email or the cold call opener. It's all good. I like it, but that's not the whole game. And that's not really going to take your career to the next level, get you the next meeting. But then everyone says, well, what do I say then? right? And it just turns into this. Okay, you have to
Right.
kind of think through this and play the whole game and be a student of the game. Because if you read the books, it all looks pretty until you try and implement it.
Well, I think the complex sell, like one of the things Bree brought up is how do you know you're in one versus like take a huge restaurant, right? So in that sales process, I may be selling to the server who uses it. That's the tool for their job. The bartender, the kitchen manager, the chefs, and then you're getting to the general manager who may or may not be the owner. And then, so each step of that process, you're selling to them in a different way because what's important to them is different. What's important to the kitchen manager is certainly probably a little different than what's important to the bar manager. And then the GM's going to want certain things like what am I getting out of it? And then they sometimes have to, like you're saying, they're championing that information to the ownership. Who's going to write the check, right? So your sales process is not just to one person. It's different types of people or different type of positions within that organization. So your sales pitch or however you want to, whatever terminology you want to use, is different throughout that whole process. And you have to be able to adapt and do that differently.
Yeah.
And piggybacking off of what you're saying, Jamie, I think something that is not looked at close enough or often enough is communicating in the way that your clients like to communicate. They all like to communicate differently. Is that phone? Is that email? Is it LinkedIn? Like however they like to communicate, and you adapting to them as well.
Good point.
That's a great point.
Mm-hmm. So how do you know? Oh, sorry. You continue.
I was gonna say, like for us in F&B, obviously COVID changed a lot in our industry, right? So things that used to be a nice to have or were turned into a must have, right? If I can't have diners in my establishment, but I've never done takeout or to go and no online ordering before, I can either choose to shutter my doors and just try to ride it out, or I can figure out how can I stay in business, right? So a lot of people who never wanted the challenge of changing technology, they really didn't have a choice at that time. But now what's happened is consumers, our behaviors have not changed. We're now like, even though your dining room is back open, we're still going to use, Grubhub and, Uber Eats, and we're still going to do to-go orders. And we're still, so we're still using that technology. Our behaviors are kind of dictating to some of my customers, this is how we want you to adapt or do business now. And it might not be the way you've done it for the past 30 years. So in order for you to survive or be as profitable as you would like to be, you have to make a change. And that's one thing that unfortunately, I hate that happened to people who own businesses, but it made our business grow because now people are like, hey, we have to switch, right? We have to find out how to use technology. I want to sit in my seat and hit a QR code and order a beer and not have to miss the game, right? So now that's a totally different experience. Well, now I'm spoiled. So if I go to the next place and they don't have that, well, like my experience is not as, now it's all about the customer experience and stuff. So, it's just, sometimes the world dictates when changes happen. And then, so businesses have to adapt. And that's when sometimes when they call you, I'm sure Jessica had people call them and say, listen, I've got a bid, but I have to have this technology in my bid or I'm not even going to be considered, right? Because the other companies are doing it. So.
And I got to imagine in food and beverage, certainly in the last 2 years, there was a constant excuse, objection, reason, delay for not completing the transaction. How could you tell when you could that was either real or you could recover from it?
Go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, in the food and beverage industry, I'm not
Well,
in that.
In food and beverage, you have
okay.
Obviously COVID. We should sit and wait.
Right.
How did you either determine that was real or fake?
We literally had some businesses that were clients of ours that they weren't using that technology, and they literally, hey, my business is down 45%. right? So it's like the numbers sometimes tell them you have to do this, right? So we can see when a business is struggling, like, hey, they've only had so much in sales, right? And so like I can only have 25% occupancy. So if that's the only stream I have for business, I'm dying on the vine, right? So sometimes it's just the cold reality that you can see it in the numbers that they have to make that change. And then what happens is some customers thought, okay, well now I'm back open, I don't have to worry about that anymore. But then they're like, hey, 60% of my business is now digital.
Yeah.
Nobody, I still don't have the same amount of people coming in my restaurant. They're ordering through a third-party delivery system. Those guys made a killing, right? All those companies, look at their growth over the 2 years we've been on COVID, because more and more people started using their technology. I might not have ever used Uber Eats before COVID, but then it happened and I adapted as a consumer. So that in turn grew that business. And then, with a restaurant, they could go to a restaurant and say, hey, listen, we can grow your revenue by 30% if you take on this new technology, because that's what your customers expect from you.
Yeah.
So I think it's the expectation from consumers a lot that drove that business, and they didn't have a choice, unfortunately.
Well, you also took the enablement argument instead of trying to recover from the cost objection,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And some of them didn't argue about cost at that point because they knew. Well, like one of the things we like to talk about is, it's amazing if you Google how many businesses in today's age don't have a website. How do people find you? Like, that's almost like, how would I find your business if I didn't drive by your store every day, right? So think about the people who don't live in the same neighborhood you do. So it's like you think everybody's using technology, but it's amazing when you go out and talk, they're not using it.
Yeah.
And then they don't see the cost of not doing business that way. If you had we have Google Order where people can just Google your restaurant and order straight from Google without having to leave and go to another web page and do all that stuff, right? But it's like, hey, we have data that shows if you have that available, your revenue is going to increase by 15 to 20%. And your restaurant, what does that look like for your bottom line, right? So it's like you almost can't afford not to do some of those things.
Cool. Do we have time for one more question?
I believe so. How do you get clients to engage ones who know very little about your company?
Ooh. Go
Referrals
ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say a lot of that's where like the reason why I enjoy referrals so much is like there's nothing better than when someone calls you and says, "Hey, Jessica, you work with this company. I have a friend that works there. He told me to call you because I have a problem. They have a problem they want to solve. They're calling you." So that kind of that's when they're engaged and ready to go. But a lot of that is asking questions, right? What are they trying to accomplish and what are they trying to solve in their business? And then, they may not know your company, but they understand if you can solve their problem, that's more important to them, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. My, I guess you would say pitch always is a question. So my first question to my client is, hey, my name's Jessica. Are you guys currently using drone services? Straight up. Yes or no question. And then it's kind of like a way in for me and kind of how to gauge the conversation as well and what direction it's going to go. But it also piques their interest, like, ooh, drones. Now I do have like a niche service that I am selling. So it's interesting and cool, but I use that to my advantage as well.
Well, it brings up curiosity.
Right.
And it's like, well, why would I use drones?
Right.
Which starts a conversation.
Yes, it's all about the conversation.
Right.
I think that's so important. Like first and foremost, anything is the conversation and showing them it's not about me and what I'm trying to push to you, but it's about you and how I can help you.
Yes, and you get them talking about that.
It also gives me a little, I'm a hunter. I do outbound sales, so it gives me a little inside information of what's going on.
And which you can compound on the next call.
Exactly.
You'll start to find a pattern. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's a rapport relationship building too, knowing that I know something about your company. I know what you guys are doing, how you're doing it, and let me show you how I can improve it or what my service is able to offer you.
Yeah. And you got
100%
the,
agree. Yep.
yeah, because I think I got to believe everybody wants to know what it could do.
Sure.
And if it can't do anything, they're not going to buy it anyway, right?
Yeah,
So getting there as fast as possible is helpful.
sure.
But you'll find like some people around, like you're saying, the hardest part for some salespeople, maybe they're new, or maybe they're into a different vertical and they're selling a product they're not as comfortable as they used to be, is getting that conversation started.
Well,
Once you get the conversation started, then you can start asking the questions. So
right.
I
guess
think that's
we're
great.
all talking
Great
about,
point.
yeah, you give the value prop. You know, this is why people come to us. We do boop, 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 and then flip it back to them. You know, it was the stuff I was taught years ago, but nobody wants to listen to a commercial. But
No, they
what
don't.
Jessica did with that, a good question that spurs curiosity, that, you know, everyone's got some kind of opinion on it, right? Is she talking about delivering Amazon packages or some crazy guy, riding it? Or,
Right. Are they spying on
Yeah.
you? What are they
right?
doing?
You know something I
Drone.
don't.
What are you going to do with that drone? What are you talking about? But I was going to make the comment earlier. You had mentioned real estate. They were talking about real estate. Is like there's so many agents now that use drones. Like when you go to a site to look at a house, they're doing the flyover. They're showing you the pool in the back. I mean, so like she said, it's when they say, "What would I use a drone for in my business?" I mean, that's almost like a green light for her. Like, well, let me tell you how.
Yeah. If you can
Right?
get them to
So,
laugh, then
yeah.
you got them. Cool. Hey, I appreciate everybody joining us today. I'll put this up on YouTube as soon as we're done, and hope to have everybody back next time.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks so much, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Nice
Great
to meet
meeting
you
you,
all.
Jessica and Bree. Yes.
Bye now.